Genesis chapter 3, looking at verse 14. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Now, most likely some of you have heard that before, and maybe have heard some different interpretations of what that means, and maybe really thought nothing of it. But I want to show you that there is a huge expanse of connecting information here in this one verse. To put it quite simply, the truth connects to itself. If it's truth, you can connect it from the fruit to the root, or from the root to the fruit, seamlessly. And if it is the truth, it will do that. So we're going to go back to the beginning of Genesis to understand something about this supposed curse that happens to the serpents, and that they're cursed to go upon their belly and to eat the dust all the days of their life. Now, what has the serpent done here? Well, in reality, we're talking about really a twofold event of the serpent's main agenda. And it has everything to do with what Eve was tempted with by the serpent in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the fruit that was partaken with the promise that ye would be like gods. And in the second portion is when the sons of God tempt the daughters of men, and then they bear these children unto them. Well, if you read the book of Enoch, not only did they just bear children with these daughters of men, all of which they thought were fair, but they actually educated them. And you will see that the daughters of man that were partaken by the fallen were the first peoples that were educated with what's become known now as the mystery religions. And it was none other than the daughters of men. And then this is why you see the goddesses are the heads of these mystery religions right on down to modern times. And of course we would equivalate the queen of these mystery religions, as she is known in her Babylonian figuration, as Ishtar. But her Egyptian depiction would be Hathor. And then both of these deities are symbolized with the cow. So these cows are the heifers that we see the book of Hosea talks about in reference to Ephraim being taught like these ancient heifers. It's the very same education that is being given to these daughters of men in the book of Enoch by these fallen sons. So with all of that being said, it's not just any one serpent which is particularly being cursed, because it's a serpent throughout the ages. So it's the descendancy of these serpents that have been influenced by the chief serpent on their undertaking. Now my point is that the dust that thou shalt eat all the days of thy life, all the days while they are living, they must eat something. They must eat this dust to maintain their longevity. And this dust is monatomic gold. It's that manna that we have so briefly touched upon in the last video series in relationship to the description of Jesus Christ's words out of Revelation chapter 3, as it describes that gold that was tried by fire. And then as we follow that up to the book of Exodus, the description of Moses and the Israelites at that mountain, and then the manna, the depiction of the manna, and how we've broken it down thus far with its description also in the book of Exodus that describes it as being a very small round thing, like the hoarfrost of heaven. And then it was small enough to be picked up and deposited within the dew, the morning dew of that mountain, and then that's how they collected it. So we're talking about this refined gold by fire that has brought it into a powder form. In other words, this dust. Now you should begin to see here that what I'm telling you has very deep, deep roots in the Bible all the way back to the beginning, and it's connected exactly where it should be with the serpent lie of ye are gods. Now, what you should begin to put in perspective is what I've already told you, and that this is really clarifying for you that this manna, just as Jesus Christ said, that even though your fathers ate manna in the wilderness, they are still dead, that it does not part any longevity, any immortality, or any divinity to normal men, that it was intended for these sons of God exclusively, and their immediate progeny, their first and second generations of their descendants. But once it went on down to the third, fourth, and so on, each one of these descendants lost a portion of their genetic heritage, which eventually disallowed the descendants that still walk amongst us today to benefit from this monatomic gold at all. And that's why they are in this obsession with these bloodlines and these genetics, this DNA, of which you see Dan represents the pinnacle of, represents the Don key or the Nod key. And we're going to come up to that a little later. So the fullness of what this verse is telling you, that this cursing of the serpents because they have done something, it's the fulfillment of what I said that would happen to them, that once they took unto themselves the daughters of men and conspired with this plan, that they rebelled. And when they rebelled, they were cut off from the true tree of life. And then they had to create through the knowledge of the prince of this world, who is at this time now the fallen prince of this world, being represented as Enki, the chief physician. This Enki is the one who developed and devised this new way of working the element of gold to work with the genetics of the descendancy of these sons of God. And that it would thereby be the way that they could maintain thy life by eating the dust of the earth. In other words, this bread of the earth turned by fire. That's what that means. So Dan, in Genesis chapter 49, is representative, or being represented as a serpent judge in the last days. Dan is one of these ancient mighty men. Dan is one of these serpents who've been cursed to go upon their belly. In other words, go upon the ground. And then the serpents themselves are representative with snake holes and living under the ground. In other words, the serpents being upon their belly are under us. That's a part of the curse. That's a part of their sealing, that they are cursed to the ground and being underneath the ground. But we see that a representation of the remedy for their curse that's being offered to them by their God is that in order for them to maintain their life, that they are going to eat this dust. And this dust is being fulfilled in the very precise words of what Jesus Christ is talking about in this gold being tried by fire. That's what it means. So it's not man that is the ye that are the gods being talked about, that it's these ancient serpent gods. And if you remember talking about this temple that was to be found Mount Serpent, aka Horeb Sinai, that is producing this wayward firestone, this powdered substance from gold for the pharaonic dynasties. These pharaohs are representative of what? Serpent kings, What do they all have on their little headdress coming out of their forehead? Which is symbolic of this rising Kundalini serpent, the crooked serpent. Just like we saw that rod of Hermes being associated with the wisdom of Enki. There are these serpent kings. These pharaonic descendants believe themselves to be descended from these very ancient gods. And this is why they themselves are still in the practice of producing this powdered gold, this manna. And it is one portion of the dust of the earth that they themselves must eat. Now, the other portion of the dust of the earth is the carbon atom, which is representative of the material form. The carbon atom represents all material creation. Material creation, the material, is the shadow. So in their philosophy, they are combining the light and the dark. The light for them, in this instance, represents the monatomic gold as the shining one, that shining dust, which now represents the name of Mount Sinai, as Sinai means shining one. It's the place where the shining dust was created. Now, in order to infuse their material bodies, the dark, with what they believed was the life-giving spirit, but in other words, the bastardized version of it, this monatomic powdered gold, they infused the dark with the light. In other words, this wayward firestone. That's the dust of the earth. Two portions of the dust of the earth that they are focused upon. That would be the carbon, the image of man 666. They needed to crack that code. And then in order to infuse themselves with the remedy for the curse that had overcome them, then they had created this technique of using the monatomic gold to counter that. And it's all right there. Now I'm going to show you something else that will show you why I took so much time to try to explain that to you. And because it's what I told you is real. And it's going to play out in the world around you. Get a load of this. Now, this is what I call the fractal. And this is what I call amazing. What you're looking at is a map of biblical lands. And I've got it right here on the portion that deals with the Sinai Peninsula. And as you know, in the Sinai Peninsula is where this mount, this shining mountain was, where we've already thus far seen Moses has taken the Israelites and has even gone as far to perform the making of this powdered gold and to order them to drink it. And then, of course, we've seen all the associations with the manna that fell from heaven and the dew, and I told you about that temple that we're going to look into a little further. So basically, this dust that these serpents are cursed to eat to maintain their life is being made in this area right here at the Sinai Peninsula. Right there. Now, what does the Bible say? That the serpent is going to eat the dust all the days of his life. And then you see the serpent right on down to the serpent kings. That's what they're doing. They're eating this dust to maintain their supposed lives. All right, look at this. What does it look like that this Red Sea shape is beginning to make? Does it look like a serpent? Does it look like a large serpent with its mouth gaping open, eating the Sinai Peninsula? In other words, the dust of the earth. Yes, it does. Not only does this look like a giant serpent with its mouth open, eating, just as the Bible said, the dust of the earth. More importantly, the specific dust of the earth of which Jesus Christ is talking about, that's associated with this ye are gods doctrine, which is coming to us smack dab from this location right here. But we see that this body of water is known as the Red Sea. The dragon, the great red dragon, is what this being is known as. And of course we know that this dragon is associated with the sea, with the abyss. So basically, this is a full fulfillment. This is full fractal complete. The great red dragon, the Leviathan, the serpent, eating all the days of their life. They are required to eat this dust of the earth. And it's right there. Now, on larger maps, you can follow this Red Sea shape down, and it's just a big, old, fat-looking, long body, just like it looks like a serpent. And if you were to follow it as it goes on down to, I think, the Suez Canal, it takes a sharp turn, almost a 90-degree angle. And you can see it one of two ways, connecting to the Freemasonic Square, or you can see it connecting as the Crooked Serpent. But I think that's pretty amazing. That the truth is literally all around you. All around you. So, take a good look at that. And now understand that we're right on target for the fullness of what the truth is. So it's not mankind that's supposed to be eating this gold that is exclusive to these sons of God and their descendancy. As I told you, that's the obsession with the bloodlines. Any of you other people that are being fooled into believing this stuff, man, I don't know. If you're still watching, I can't almost see how you are still fooled into believing this stuff, but I guess, I don't know. Okay, so at this point, let me show you a couple other connections here. I'd like to show you something here from Job. And before we do that, let's try looking at John 6 real quick. This is John 6, where we've already shown you that Jesus Christ, without a doubt, is speaking out against this manna, describing himself as the bread. This is the bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna, in other words, powdered gold, dust gold, and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. Now, you have to start, if he's talking about when he's saying their fathers, who is he really speaking to right now? Okay, he's speaking to a portion of the Israelites. He's speaking to a connected descendancy that is coming from an Egyptian heritage. And this should begin to make a lot of sense, because the descendancy of Jacob is really what takes over the biblical reigns as Israel. So after Jacob basically adopts in these two sons born unto Joseph in the land of Egypt, from royal Egyptian lineage. And it's even more important to understand that their descendancy is coming from off of their mother's side. And if you know anything now about the sacred feminine or the rites of succession, how they see genetics, that this is why Israel is claiming its divinity. This is why fallen Israel has rejected its original heritage and now has changed covenants and is now begin to accept this doctrine of ye are gods through its Egyptian lineage. So the portion of Israel that Jesus Christ is talking about, describing their fathers, is the portion of Israel that is claiming their fathers through this pharaonic lineage. And that would be directly the descendants of Jacob, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Now, listen to this to just kind of set the tone further for what we're talking about. Verse 26, Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we might work the works of God? You see what they're interested in there? They're interested in becoming godlike, directly in the face of what Jesus Christ is trying to tell them, that the way to perfection is through him, no other way. Partly because the serpent has blocked the path, or sought to block the path, in the early days of the Genesis account. So now, because the way is become so muddled up, it's become so overgrown with thicket, brambles, and thorns, Jesus Christ has come into this world to clear that way. Now the only clear path of understanding to the Father and this perfection that we're to achieve in eternity in the spirit abode, is through that of Jesus Christ. And that's what he's plainly telling them. But as you can see, they don't want to hear it. What they want to hear is how they can continue to find out how they can become godlike, but in the wrong way. How they've been influenced by their forefathers. And this is what they say. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus plainly says, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. Manna over and over and over again is being termed as bread. This bread is being referenced as this dust of gold that's been tried by fire that is coming from the earth. They're likening their fathers, their forefathers, this portion of Israel, as the ones that have benefited and even taught them that they should be eating this manna. Now, why that's important to understand at this point, and just make the clear designation from line 28, that the manna in their eyes is to make them godlike. What shall we do that we might work the works of God? That's what they're interested in. They're still interested in the serpent's lie, which is you see them being fulfilled as what they've been told about this manna that their forefathers ate. Well, Jesus is telling you that, yeah, your fathers did eat that manna in the wilderness, but they are dead. They are dead. So let's just make the clear connection, because some of you guys might not have seen it, to Ephraim and Manasseh, because Ephraim becomes the leader of Israel, the leader of northern Israel, the leader of the northern 10 tribes, who have all fallen unto idolatry and have maintained their idolatry. They're known as the lost 10 tribes of Israel to this day, of which Jesus Christ has pleasantly referred to them as the lost sheep of Israel. I want you to see here that this is where this obsession with the gold, this obsession with the mystery religions of ancient Egypt through the foundation of the earlier ancient Babylon, this is where all of this comes into play. It comes into play to the Hebrew Bible directly from Ephraim and Manasseh. It says, verse 5, chapter 48, "And now thy 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simon, they shall be mine." This is Jacob adopting in to Israel 2 more, which brings the tribe count now to 14. Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim becomes the 13th tribe, adopted in, put before his brother Manasseh. And then, as you know, that Dan is connected to Ephraim as being the 13th judge of Israel. And then this all relates back to all of this crazy 13 symbology that you see being displayed everywhere. And then most of the people who are truly unaware of its root and meaning are being confused into calling it something to do with this 13 love. And I assure you, this 13 has nothing to do with what true love is. It's all about deception and multi-layered meanings that are hiding the root of truth. So if Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim now becomes the leader of Israel, and Ephraim's lineage is directly from his mother's side of priestly origin, royal priestly origin from the land of Egypt. And as you can see, I want you to notice one more thing here. I want you to see what Joseph does. It says in verse 13, "And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him." He crossed his arms with them. And this arm crossing is something that you see the pharaohs of Egypt do. I wish I had a picture and I was ready to show you this, but I didn't think to have it ready. But this is further connection, further symbolism to the descendancy of Jacob and their affinity to these Egyptian mystery religions. Okay? So, if you want to understand further about that, view a video series that I did entitled Ephraim and Manasseh, USA, UK. And as we go further, now you see in line 25, "Even by the God of thy father who shall help thee, and by the Almighty who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of thy father prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren." Now, when it's describing the head of Joseph, it's describing the descendancy of Joseph. It's describing Ephraim, who is to receive this crown atop his head. Now, this is that portion of Israel that believes itself it's going to achieve this divinity by following this serpent doctrine, and that they have abandoned the original way of their forefathers. They've accepted a new covenant that they have now began to speedily follow. If we look at chapter 49, Jacob's dying blessing, it describes right here, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. This is talking about in the last days. Dan shall be a serpent, by the way, an adder in the path. There's our Dan, prophesized as a serpent. And in relationship to the ancient mighty men. So understand, the fathers that they are talking about are in relationship to this descendancy that is going through the lineage of Ephraim and Manasseh right on down to the Pharaonic kings in ancient Egypt. Dead on it. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. So this portion of Israel through the lineage of Jacob, and then they trace their lineage back to these pharaohs that are doing the very same thing. Okay. Now, I want you to see this verse right here. Very important here. Verse 49. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. Before I show you that, let's just show you some biblical proof more about this gold being tried by fire, coming out of the earth, being termed bread. Chapter 28, Job. Surely there is a vein for the silver and a place for gold where they fine it, where they refine it. This is talking about that Hathor temple in Mount Sinai. At that portion. And then we go on to, iron is taken out of the earth and brass is molten out of the stone. He setteth an end to darkness and searcheth out all perfection. The stones of darkness and the shadow of death. The flood breaketh out from the inhabitant, even the waters forgotten of thy foot. They are dried up, they are gone away from men. As for the earth, out of it cometh bread, and under it is turned up as it were fire. This is the depiction of the manna, of the gold that is coming out of the earth. This is that bread that Jesus Christ is speaking out against, which is not the bread that came down from heaven. This is that manna gold, that bread that is being produced from the earth. And its association of it being turned up by the fire. Now listen to verse 6. The stones of it are the place of sapphires, and it hath dust of gold. There's our reference to exactly what we're talking about. This powdered gold. And it was a small, round thing like the hoarfrost of heaven. This dust of gold is that bread that was being brought from out of the earth, that was being turned by the fire. Now, what's interesting is we start talking about wisdom in this reference here to chapter 28 of Job. And at least the narrator in this portion of the chapter 28 is really speaking out against this gold. Understands that there is somebody, or that there is a multitude of people that believe that this gold, this dust of gold that's been turned by fire, this bread of gold, this manna of gold, is somehow the path to wisdom. Well, this writer begins to speak out and says that, well, there's a path which no fowl knoweth, and which the vulture's eye hath not seen. Well, we know that the vultures are also known as the eagles, and that eagles are referenced with Ephraim, and that there's a path which no fowl knoweth. Well, we're talking about the birds of heaven in this instance. No fowl knoweth, well, we know Ishtar and the whole bunch, the whole Anunnaki pantheon of gods are depicted as these birds of heaven. The lion's whelps have not trodden it. Who are the lion's whelps? Well, those would be the sons of God that were corrupted in Ezekiel chapter 19. Ezekiel chapter 19, we see these lion's whelps. This is in reference, once again, to these ancient sons of God. So we're seeing here that somebody is all about this bread or this gold being brought from the earth. This dust of gold is being the path to wisdom. These vultures, these eagles, these lion's whelps, they're all believing in this gold. But we see further that this gold is not really where you're going to find the wisdom here. But where shall wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. The depth saith, it is not in me. So we get a difference between two lands. The land of the living, that would be us, and then the depth saith, it's not in me. Those would be these ones that are down in the abyss. and the sea saith, it is not with me. So the narrator is saying that this true wisdom, this true understanding, he's going to continually compare it, that you cannot get it with this gold. It cannot be gotten for gold. Neither shall it be silver, neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. It cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir. Once again, the gold, the crystal cannot equal it. The exchange of it, wisdom, shall not be for jewels of fine gold. That's the monatomic gold. The fine gold is the powdered gold, that small round thing like the hoar frost of heaven. No mention shall be made of coral or of pearls, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia shall not equal it, neither shall it be valued with pure gold. So the writer intended all of these things to be compared with this gold. It showed you those that had some sort of affinity with it, these fowls of heaven, these birds of heaven, these vultures, the eagle, Ephraim, the lion's whelp, the fallen sons of God. They all believe that they've trotted this path to this dust of gold for their wisdom. Well, this writer says, nope, that's not it. And if you want to see at the very bottom, the declaration of wisdom is as this. And unto man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. This is almost an admonishment to these partakers of this gold right here, these fowls of heaven, these vultures, and these lions' whelp, telling them that they better have fear of the Lord, fear of the true Lord, and that this is the beginning to the understanding of wisdom. To depart from evil is when you really got understanding. So it's written in complete perspective to what we're talking about. Completely. And I could follow up these symbolisms here that I told you about. There's a path which no fowl knoweth. And what I said about the vultures and what I said about the lion's whelps. And you will see that it's in perspective exactly who I'm telling you. The main players of who is concerned with this false doctrine. That the fowl knoweth, that's going to be the birds of heaven, okay, the original Anunnaki, and then the vultures would be the descendancies through the lineage of the Pharaonic kings as it comes down to Ephraim, as Ephraim is now further symbolized as the eagle, but the original term for, or vulture and eagle are interchangeable. Vulture and eagle are interchangeable. So we see the vulture in its first reference as it pulls from Egypt, and then it eventually evolves into the symbolism that Ephraim turns it into as the eagle, just like we see them using it as the seal of the United States. So it's all right there. The three main players. The original Anunnaki, birds of heaven, the descendancy of the Pharaonic kings, and of course the lions' whelps will be the fallen sons of God, the descendancy of the Anunnaki themselves. It's all right there. All related to this dust of fine gold. Okay. If you're still following me, if I didn't lose you there, if we were to go to chapter 24 of the book of Job, if you look at verse 5, behold, as wild asses in the desert go they forth to their work, rising betimes for a prey. The wilderness yieldeth food for them and for their children. Who are we talking about here? The wild asses. I told you the wild asses. Donkey. We're talking about the Danites once again. The Danites are being referenced as being in the desert for multiple reasons. But in this instance, the association is going to be directly to the Sinai Mount, that great desert mount, because it's in reference to where they're getting their food. Behold, as wild asses in the desert go they forth to their work, rising betimes for a prey. The wilderness yieldeth food for them and for their children. Now, the wilderness that is yielding food for them and their children has lesser and higher meanings of understanding. We're going to talk about the highest meaning of this understanding that I have currently right now, and that's going to be what we saw in relationship with that temple that was on Mount Sinai, that was making that food. And we've got the biblical proof to show you a little bit more better that that's exactly what's being talked about. So it's the wild asses, it's the Dans, it's the descendancy of the sons of God, the ancient mighty men, who are once again being the true benefactors of this manna, that is this food that's being yielded out of the wilderness, out of the Sinai Peninsula, that is also being seen as food for them and for their children, for their descendancy. Their descendancy, as I said, their immediate descendancy was eating of this also. Now, to prove that that's exactly what it's talking about, it's the same wilderness food that we're comparing with the manna. View verse 8. They are wet with the showers of the mountains. They are wet with the showers of the mountains. Now, what are the showers of the mountains? That's the dew. The dew that was to come down that had this manna in it. It's basically describing that they're covered all over with the blessings of the showers of the manna that's being produced from this mountain, or these mountains, because there are other places, there are other regions where this is being produced also. This Hathor temple in Serpent is just the one location that was close enough and relative enough for Moses to travel to for the immediate purposes that he had in mind. But of course, there were other refineries. And to give you what another major one is and was on the other side of the world in Mesoamerica, it's the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. And that's in Mesoamerica, right outside of Mexico City. It's a place I've actually been to before. And it's Teotihuacan, which literally means the place where men go to become gods. Basically the same interpretation of Mount Sinai as being the shining one. In other words, the illuminated one, where those go to achieve their illumination, or where those go to achieve, or where those go to receive the wayward firestone, the shining stone. So Sinai, as termed or meaning shining one, is in reference to this illumination, who's trying to achieve it, how they're trying to achieve it, and what they're trying, the how of what they're trying to achieve, how they're producing it. It's all right there. So they are wet with the showers of the mountains. Perfect accord to what we're talking about with this manna that was descending down with the dew. Behold, as wild asses in the desert, go they forth to the work, rising betimes for a prey. That's important to say because that's what the locusts are about to do. Ever so often, at the end of these world ages, they rise again. They rise again, and just know that there's so much more to say about this. I don't want to complicate things any further and speak out about a bunch of other things, but let's just keep it focused on this eating upon the mountains. Okay? The wilderness yieldeth food for them and for their children. All right, we need to understand what this term wilderness means, because we found it in Exodus as it was describing the area of Mount Sinai, that they were wandering in the wilderness. Okay. Let's look at this here real quick. Mount Sinai, mountain in the south central part of a peninsula in northwestern end of Arabia. Remember that map that I showed you? Okay, that's the Sinai Peninsula. That's what we're talking about. The serpent eating the dust, the place where the dust of the earth was being refined. It's right there, right there. God made many significant revelations of himself and his purposes to Israel there. Now remember, Ephraim is Israel. Ephraim himself is being termed as Israel. The meaning of the name is unclear, but it probably means shining. And we're talking about Sinai. And was likely derived from the word sin. And sin is a Babylonian moon god. The suggestion that it means clay does not in any way fit the nature of the terrain. But it does if you understand that Enki is the one who was supposed to have genetically engineered mankind out of clay by mixing the blood, the semen, and the spittle of a slain god with the clay of the earth to produce a descendancy of primitive workers that they would have you believe is where we came from as mankind. So they don't understand how Sinai can also associate itself with clay, but you can understand that if you understand the stories that are associated with Enki and the creation of man through clay, that we can even found still recorded within the Hebrew Bible itself. There's places in the Bible that talk about man being made from the clay of the earth, when in Genesis it clearly states that mankind was created from the dust of the earth. And the dust of the earth of which he's created in that instance is the carbon atom, which is 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. And then what was breathed into him was that true essence of spirit that came from God Almighty himself, not from some sort of powder of gold found underneath the earth. So there is a whole bunch of their doctrine that is infused into this story of Mount Sinai and the original root meanings of the name. So the meaning of the name is clear to us now because we understand about the monatomic gold and that it was the actual place in which it was being manufactured, this wayward firestone, which was the means that they could achieve their illumination. In other words, achieve their shining. So, and was likely derived from the word sin. Now, that's incredibly interesting because sin, being this Babylonian moon god, is just incredible for a lot of reasons. For one reason, because of that famous verse that describes the wages of sin are death. So in other words, this sin god is the one who pays the wages of mistakes by death. Now, if you can expand that to understanding what I'm telling you, that the second cup is going to come from the moon. In other words, the symbolism of the Babylonian moon god Sin, the illuminated one, he's the one that's seeking to destroy the sinners, or at least who he believes are the sinners. And then we know that Jesus Christ is declaring mercy. I will have mercy and not a sacrifice. So all of this is being cleverly covered up by many of these YouTube channels to keep you guys looking to ancient Hebrew tradition as the way, when clearly it's not. Clearly it's not. And that Jesus Christ came unto the house of Israel, was born through the descendancy of the house of Israel to bring this house of Israel out of their backsliding. And Jesus could have came through any other lineage on the face of the earth. It didn't have to be Israel. Jesus Christ is not a Jew, but Jesus Christ chose to fulfill as a Jew because it was the most logical place where the gospel could be spread to the most able-minded of peoples. It was the main trade routes. It was the main routes for knowledge. It was the Israelites, or the ancient Hebrews at that time, were already in contact with emissaries of the divine Father. They were already in contact with the divine leading of the Spirit of truth through the ancient prophets and the ancient seers that did know. So they were already being pre-prepared for a destiny to deliver to the world what the actuality of the truth of the love of the Father was. But we see that they were beguiled by the serpent somewhere along the way. But yet Jesus Christ never gave up on them and came to fulfill that truth the truth that they themselves were incapable of fulfilling, he fulfilled it as he walked that life, and then they try to condemn him for it. And they did. And they did. It's all right there. Okay. All right. I want you to maintain now, or I'm going to try to convey to you something real quick here that's going to help you understand what we just read about the wilderness here. Okay? Job 24, verse 5. This is just to convey to you that these wild asses, otherwise known as onagers, and if you were to look up onager and discover a little bit more about it, I might have time to show you at the end of this. They're being described as only able to enter or venture into the cities after the cities have been forsaken in ruins, just like the locust of Revelation chapter 9. That these Danites, they cannot come upon our world until this great catastrophe or destruction has taken place. So that's the fulfillment where it says, rising betimes for a prey. They're waiting for something to take place. It's going to be the second cup, the destruction of commercial Babylon. In other words, the destruction of the cities. And then they can come and try to, or the seal has been broken and they can come upon our world and try to prepare the way for their king, Enki, the Nahesh, the Serpent. That's what their mission is. Their mission is to spread the false doctrine, to finish the temptation of surviving mankind, and then prepare your mind to receive this coming false prince as the Messiah. That's what they want to do. So when it says the wilderness yieldeth food for them and for the children, I want you to see that when it's telling you the wilderness, it's talking about this connection with Sinai and this gold. It's going to be right there in front of you, but it's going to be the same thing that you need to understand that Jesus Christ was conveying as you saw what these described. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert. You're going to see that this desert is Horeb, Sinai, okay, where they got this bread. And then, as you saw Jesus clarify, your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. And then now you see Job chapter 24 talking about, once again, these wild asses, these Dans, these onagers, these fallen sons of God. They are getting their food from the wilderness, yielding the food for them and their children, their descendancy, the serpent kings. And now you'll understand what that wilderness term is describing. The Bible uses the term Sinai for both the mountain and the entire wilderness area. Sometimes Sinai is called the mount, sometimes the mountain of God, sometimes the mount of the Lord. The term Horeb is often used to refer to Sinai in such a way as to make the names synonymous. So in other words, Horeb can mean wilderness, it can mean Sinai, it can mean the mountain itself, or it can mean the region surrounding. The whole region is synonymous with the wilderness or a wasteland. The term Horeb is often used to refer to Sinai in such a way as to make the name synonymous. Since Horeb means waste or wilderness area, it seems best to think of Horeb as the general term for the area and Sinai as the specific peak where God manifested himself to Moses. So in other words, this Horeb that's now associated with Mount Sinai, the connection to this Egyptian temple that was dedicated to Hathor, is the wilderness, where the very same wilderness where we see these sons of God are getting their food yielded to them, where this is being produced. And remember, these pharaonic kings consider themselves to be the descendancy of these sons of God. So this would fulfill, yieldeth food for them and their children. Now, even though it's not working for them in its fullness, they're still producing it and they're still making it, because it actually has technological importance. to them also, and we might get into that a little further as it comes down to how the pyramids were built using this very same powdered gold. But at this point, you need to understand that this God is describing, or the Father himself is describing, these ones that are eating this food from off the mountains are on the wrong path. It's the fallen sons of God. Now, I'm going to clarify that, and this video is over, and then we'll move to the next one. Wait till you see this. Remember chapter 18 of Ezekiel, and this is right before chapter 19, where we get this incredible description of Ishtar being described. It says, "What is thy mother? A lioness? She lay down among the lions. She nourished her whelps among young lions, and she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion." Now remember, Dan is depicted in Deuteronomy 33, as leaping forth from the land of giants like a lion's whelp. This is Ishtar, aka the Egyptian symbolized Hathor, who is corrupting these early sons of God. And then it describes eventually where their spirit, where their souls were maintained, and they were maintained in the land of Egypt. As I told you, it's directly under the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the word pyramid is not even original to the Egyptians, it's original to the Greek. Pyramid in Egypt, what they were called, was a word term mir, M-E-R, and it meant ascending, or the place of ascendance. In other words, this is where these souls were being held until a dispensational age, until they were risen unto judgment. It's one of the locations, it's one of the entrances to the locations for the storehouses of souls, both the wicked and the good. But as it's relating to the descendancy that are associated with the lineage of men. Now, the descendancy that's directly associated, that does not come from men at all, are held at another place. But you got to think about it. The sons of God are a part of a portion of the lineage of men, so they are held underneath the same location, but at this location, they're separated. It's just hard to explain right now, but I just want you to see that it's describing that these souls are being maintained and held in this land of Egypt. That's what the pyramids are. So we describe, thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the water. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. She had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule. All of this is describing Ishtar. All of this is describing her corruption. This is even describing her eventually on the moon. And this is eventually describing this fire that they plan on bringing down out of a rod of one of her branches, which you should know by now represents the tribe of Ephraim, the Illuminati on the moon. Okay? But I didn't want to get off track here. All right, watch this. Chapter 18, the book of Ezekiel. But if a man be just, and do that which is lawful and right, and hath not eaten upon the mountains. Remember what I showed you? The representation of two gods in the Bible. And I told you that this is the Spirit of truth that's speaking out against Israel, that's speaking out against Israel in its false condemning of the children through the sins of the father. What mean ye? That ye use this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. The Spirit of truth, the true representation of the Father, is saying here that you cannot condemn the children for the sins of the father. Talking about these fathers that have eaten sour grapes. Now, the fulfillment of the fathers that have eaten sour grapes have eaten a false doctrine. The portion of this false doctrine that's being referred is the ye are God's doctrine. Those are the sour grapes which are being delivered by this one known as Ishtar. Thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. That's Ishtar. That is the mother of this portion of Israel. It's also the corrupter, the original corrupter of these young lions. And why is it being termed as Ishtar, being the corrupter of the young lions? Because Ishtar represents the sacred feminine, the deity goddess concept of how they were going to achieve their dominion, how the sons of God were to achieve it. They had to go through the sacred feminine, the XX chromosome, which represents how they were going to break that seal. The XX chromosome, you can see those two X's that are formed within the geometry of the star tetrahedron. So the symbolism, the figurative description of the corruption of Ishtar is really the corruption of the ideology of their plan to use the daughters of men as a way for them to achieve their dominion, the control of this world, by fostering the descendancy of the demigods who would produce eventually the elite race who would eventually become the Illuminati that would fulfill the great work to break the seal, all done through the plan of the sacred feminine. And the sacred feminine is what this Ishtar basically represents, a philosophical representation of their plan to take unto themselves the daughters of men. So what is their mother? What is the mother of the birthing of their rebellion? Well, it's this idea that they had to create the sacred feminine through using the XX chromosome of the lineage of mankind, the female descendancy, as a way to produce these Elites to do the great work. It's all right there. So these young lions are corrupted by this Ishtar doctrine, the sacred feminine doctrine. In other words, taking unto themselves the daughters of men. They were corrupted. So it's symbolizing her as taking unto herself two of these young lions, which is, we're about to close this video, which is important to see, because there's Ishtar right there. This is a real archaeological, as you can see, huge stela. This is Ishtar being depicted as a bird of heaven, just like we see here, wearing her horned, conical, witch-like hat headdress. What does she have underneath of her? She has submitted underneath of her two young lions. Now, let's not forget her connection that she has with these owls, the symbolism for wisdom, and then the symbolism for wisdom relates back to Sophia in Greek, which is the symbolism for, or relates to a definition akin to wisdom as it's attuned to Baphomet. And then all this is going to tie right on back to the dust of the serpent. And I've showed you that in the Baphomet picture, how we've got the serpent underneath in that picture of Baphomet, even representing the eating of the dust of the earth. Well, this is a real archaeological artifact that shows Ishtar the fulfillment of this scripture right here in her corrupting these young lions. And there it is. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion. And it learned to catch the prey, and it devoured men. Remember what we saw in Job chapter 24, that those wild asses were rising betimes for a prey. I told you who's corrupting them unto this doctrine. All right? It's right there. So she corrupts one of these lions, and then eventually that fails, and then we see that they're sealed, they're bound, and then eventually she waits, and then she corrupts another young lion. So in this narrative of chapter 19 of the book of Ezekiel, which really fulfills what the tetrahedral geometry is all about, which is 19.5. And that's why it's so significant to see this on chapter 19 as it relates to the seal, which relates to the chains that they were bound in, which relates to the X marks the spot of the Pyramid of Giza, which represents the two X's of the female chromosome, the seal that they're trying to break, which now forms the star tetrahedron of the Star of David, which now, if you were to circumscribe it in a sphere of the earth, we see these points culminate at 19.5, and this is exactly where we see the reference with 19.5 in her waiting for the hope of the seal to be broken. And I'm condensing. I'm really rushing through this because I don't like going past an hour. But all of that can be followed up and shown to you just like I'm showing you all of this. So that picture is archaeological evidence for the fulfillment of this ancient scribe recording these two young lions that were corrupted by the sacred feminine doctrine of Ishtar, which we know is all about taking unto themselves the daughters of men, which these daughters of men become the first goddesses of the ancient legends and lore. All right. Now, setting the tone here real quick, chapter 18. This representation of the Father is not Yahweh. This is the real Spirit of truth that is coming through, and Ezekiel the seer is picking up on this truth, and he's declaring the proclamation of the Spirit of truth, which is saying, behold, all souls are mine. As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. So it's clarifying, it's saying that if the sons have not sinned, they're not going to die in their sin. It's only the soul that has continually sinned which will die in that sin. In other words, the wages of sin are death. Listen to what it says in this next line that's absolutely amazing. But if a man be just, and do that which is lawful and right, and hath not eaten upon the mountains. Blow the trumpet. Exactly. And hath not eaten upon the mountains. And it is continually said over and over again that hath not eaten upon the mountains. Hath not eaten what upon the mountains? Hath not eaten this manna. Hath not forsaken the truth of so many seers and prophets to describe the perfection of the Father through the Son, that is the way to achieve immortality. That all of those that have eaten upon the mountains, as their forefathers have directed them, are dead, and they have died in that sin. For I have no pleasure in the death of him that dieth, say the Lord God. Wherefore turn yourselves and live ye. That's exactly what that is talking about. And we could go into great detail breaking down this proverb, but I think that you saw the proverb was already broken down. And the description of the mother is this vine, this false doctrine of the sacred feminine, which is the real sour grapes. The real sour grapes that the fathers have eaten, their fathers. The representation of the demigods, these would be the Anunnaki, the sons of God. The fathers have eaten sour grapes. And then you see the depiction of the fathers being tricked by the sour grapes. And that the mother herself is being described as this blood vine. And then, of course, you know that they have this lust for blood. So, wow. Wow. There is so much more to show you guys. So much more. But because this video has gotten so long, I think that we'll go ahead and stop it right here. And remember this line. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire.